Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's that time of week again, everybody's favorite segment here on YouTube, the iHeart Sports Power Rankings. Now, I know it's quite the controversial power rankings, but that's what keeps me going. You guys, we had the biggest watched power rankings last week. Pretty excited about that. Had a lot of views. Had quite a few guys join the community and subscribe. So thanks to all the new people in the community. If you guys want to keep the discussion going, join the Discord, follow me on Twitter, all that fun stuff. Otherwise, guys, without further ado, we're going to start at the bottom with a new number 30. We got the Oakland Athletics, 1-2 against Boston, 1-2 against the Royals. So the Royals were in last week, and I think the Royals were in last for a couple weeks in a row there. But the A's lost them, and the A's have pretty much fallen to one of the worst teams in the league. Worse in the power rankings. Not necessarily have a lot of wiggle room for this one. The A's having a rough season. Number 29, we got the Washington Nationals, 0-3 against Atlanta. And they went 1-4 against Philly over the weekend. And if it wasn't for Juan Soto in a home run on here on Father's Day, they would have got swept in 8 games over the week. Nationals don't have a lot of wiggle room to go. It's a pretty stacked division with the National League East, and we know they're not going to win. Number 28, moving up a couple of spots, we got the Royals, 1-2 against San Francisco, win the series against the A's, talked about it already. Moving up a couple of spots, what does it mean? 28th doesn't mean much. You're in the Central and the American League side, a weak division, and you're in last. So Royals, 27, same couple spots for the last little while, 2-1 against Arizona. You got swept over the weekend by Milwaukee. It's going to be the same kind of story for all these bottom teams. Likely last in their division. Quiet losing record. No hope at playoffs. Probably even bad team next year. It's pretty much what this bottom row represents. Number 26, we got the Colorado Rockies, 0-3 against the Guardians. They swept the Padres over the weekend, so they're playing a little bit of spoiler, but I didn't give them a whole lot of credit for one series against a division rival. Rockies are pretty much free-fallen since they had that good April. And they're in that division where, again, last place team, no shot at the playoffs. I just don't see a path forward for them, even a couple of years in the future. Don't have a lot of things to be excited for in Colorado. Number 25, we got the Chicago Cubs, 0-3 against San Diego. And then they actually beat Atlanta over the weekend, 2-1. And one of the games was 1-0 over Friday. Cubs managed to steal one. Cubs still give a lot of people a lot of credit. Some days they have a good pitcher. Some days they have terrible pitching. Same with their bats. Some days their bats put up 20. Other days they can't find a run to save their lives. So the Cubs, long way to go. We saw them sell off last year, and they're kind of pretty much stapled in the bottom of this division. And this division is pretty stacked when it comes to the bottom. We got the Pittsburgh Pirates, number 24, 1-3 against the Cardinals, and then 1-2 against San Francisco over the weekend. They just stole the game today, avoiding the sweep. The Pirates, well, they've worked their way out of the bottom row over the past couple of years. It took them years to get out of the bottom row. Now I'm in 24, and they're holding on by the skin of their teeth. They had a little bit of run in the middle of May, late April, where they got closer. They were playing 500. They didn't get close to 500. They're playing basically 500, but since then it's been pretty atrocious for the Pirates, pretty much getting back to their old ways. Not a lot of room for them to move up in this one. Next up, Detroit Tigers, 0-3 against the White Sox, but they won a series against the Rangers over the weekend. They made a little bit of moves. I think I had them down here, and I'm just starting to give them credit. They're starting to be more like the team I expected them to be earlier in the year. Taking some division wins, not really getting swept too often. They're coming around. I do think Detroit is a better team than they've been performing, and we might start to see it. Maybe it was a schedule thing for them. They should get a little bit of a better shot against more in their division. But again, they played the White Sox this week, got swept, so it's tough to say. They're pretty Jekyll and Hyde for the most part. Number 22, got the Seattle Mariners, 1-2 against Minnesota, 1-4 against the Angels over the weekend. It's just been a disastrous season for these Mariners, and they just keep falling. Honestly, I think we had them in the top 10 of second week of the season, and they've just been slowly falling down ever since. And pretty much think that puts them out of it at this point. They got a lot of work to do, and I don't think they can make the necessary changes with this. I know we're only in June, but it's too much of a hole that they've put themselves in. Number 21, Baltimore Orioles, 2-2 against Toronto, 2-1 against Tampa. I know I say this often about the Orioles that they need to start playing above 500. They were above 500 this week, and they were against two teams that are expected to be better than them in the division. They won one series, they split one now on the road in Toronto. Got to be pretty excited with how this week went. Let's build on it, Orioles fans. Let's build on this momentum, and we might see them jump a couple spots. I think I'm moving up one spot, mainly because the teams ahead of them I still think have quite a big edge. They actually even played Seattle earlier in the year, and they lost that series, so I am giving them the benefit of being the better team now. With that, number 20, Arizona Diamondbacks 1-2 against Cincinnati, 2-1. I think it was against Minnesota over the weekend. 500 week, same kind of story as just talking about always. They got to be better than 500. We're having a really strong May-ish, early June. They got up to here, starting to fall back to earth. They're pretty much falling out of the chance of the playoff race at this point. All these teams still kind of considering out of the playoff race. Number 19 is probably going to be the same. They're in a tough division. Diamondbacks have a little bit more to be said about in the bottom row, but that's about it. Number 19, we got Texas Rangers, 1-2 against Houston, 2-2 against Detroit. I was pretty disappointed with them having that series split with Detroit over the weekend. If they were going to make that step forward as a team to have a shot in the playoffs, to at least get in the conversation, they really need to win those kind of series. And then they lost the division matchup against Houston. I guess with their pitching and that, they're pretty much where you would expect them to be. You didn't expect them to make a run at the playoffs at the beginning of the season. I guess at this point, you're not expecting it now. But they had some shine of light. They were positive in the run differential. Semien was starting to heat up. Who knows? They can definitely play spoiler down the road here. Number 18, Chicago White Sox, 3-0 against Toronto, or against Detroit, 3-0. 1-1 against Houston. Again, I'd start these videos before the last game of the night is going on. They're right now down 2-1 against Houston. Think they might not pull that out. That's kind of what I expect at this point. Number 18, it's not going to make a difference. They're not going to go up just because they win one game tonight. But the White Sox, they're creeping up. They at least have the benefit that Minnesota's stumbled a little bit. Minnesota was sitting at 600 and they've stumbled. And now giving Chicago a chance to make a run, but they're in third. They got two teams to hop and a lot of work to do. Number 17, Miami, 1-2 against Philly, 1-2 against the Mets. They still have one more game against the Mets tomorrow, but two division losses this week. I do think they're a good team. Unfortunately, they're as good as they are. They're fourth in this division, and there's not a lot of room to get out of it for them. They got to mature as a club, but they also need to bring someone in. They need to bring in like some solid, if they're going to compete in this division in the going years, definitely with the Mets, Phillies, and Braves the way they are, they need to bring in some free agents. Number 16, kind of floating in the same spot as last week, 0-2 against the Dodgers, went 4-1 against Seattle. But Angels, that skid really dampened their spirits so far this season when they went on the big losing streak. They haven't really come back from it, but we see Taylor Ward come back this week. Mike Trout hitting a couple home runs. Got to be excited. They're at least in the playoff conversation, deep in. They're out of it, of course, right now, but they're within striking distance, and all it's going to take is a nice little win streak. Same with this number 15, Boston Red Sox, 2-1 against Oakland, 2-1 against St. Louis. Another winning week. I think that's 3 weeks in a row we see Boston have a winning week. They've worked their way back into playoff contention, right there, smack dab in the middle of the American League East. It's going to be interesting to watch them play their next little round against these American League East teams, Toronto, Tampa Bay, New York, how they're going to fare. They need to start winning some of those series if I'm going to take them seriously and put them in the top two rows. Number 14, moving up a little bit here, we got Cleveland. 3-0 against Colorado, 2-1 against the Dodgers. Cleveland had a monster week, in my opinion, sweeping a much weaker team and beating a much better team in the Dodgers. Cleveland's just outperformed my expectations, and Jose Ramirez, of course, big part of that right now. They're in the conversation to be in the playoffs. They're right here on the bubble, and they're a couple games back now from Minnesota. Don't be surprised when they start playing each other. Those games, they're close on paper for sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see Cleveland make a run at it. Going forward, number 13. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with this. 2-1 against the Royals, 2-1 against Pittsburgh. They won both series, and I actually dropped them one spot. I just think the top two rows here are the playoff teams, essentially, who I'm predicting to really be in the playoff race. And right now, even though San Francisco's holding that last wildcard spot, I do think it's going to be really tough given the division they're in. And their lineup, I think the other teams are just a little bit better. So San Francisco, I know it's the history of this channel. I get a lot of hate from the Giants fans because I didn't give them enough credit early last year. And even this year, people were saying I undercredit them. We'll see how it ends. But right now, 13 for me. Number 12, Philadelphia Phillies. 2-1 against Miami. 4-1 against Washington. Another streak that they were on. I think it ended today, but they had another 5-game winning streak after winning 9 in a row before that. So Philly's been on fire since they were doing pretty atrocious, pretty much since the firing of Joe Girardi. Philly right now is my pick to sneak into the playoff in that 12th spot there. Number 11, we got Tampa Bay Rays. 0-3 against the Yankees, 1-2 against Baltimore. It's a disappointing week for them. The gap that they had on the teams outside of the playoffs has shrunk, and the Rays are holding on, and not a good week for them, losing both series against teams below them, of course. Those are usually where you want to pick up wins. The depth and the pitching rotation are starting to be some pretty big question marks for me, whether they're going to be able to play typical Tampa Bay's Rays ball that we're all so used to. We'll see going forward. Number 10, Atlanta Braves. 3-0 against Washington, 1-2 against the Cubs. So going into the Cubs series, they were still on that massive win streak. They lost 2 to the Cubs in a row there. But I'm not going to hold it against them. They were on fire for a while, and we're starting to see why they were the World Series champs last year. Even though they don't have Freddie Freeman this year, Matt Olson's filling void at least all right. And Austin Riley, all those guys, playing monster. Travis D'Arnaud had a 3 home run week. Got to be worried about this offense for the Atlanta Braves. Number 9, we got the Milwaukee Brewers, 1-2 against the Mets. They swept the Reds. So Milwaukee continues to kind of do what they were doing early in the season, beating the teams that they should, and actually picking up a sweep against most of the teams that they should, like the Reds. So that's really what keeps Milwaukee afloat, is the way they beat up on their own division. Whether they're the leader of their division doesn't matter at this point, because they're at least leading the way in the wild card, and playing those weaker opponents a little more often is at least a big boost for them over these guys who have to play a much stronger division on the regular. Like I was talking about, Miami, number 17, right? Number 8, we got the Toronto Blue Jays, 2-2 against Baltimore, 1-2 against the Yankees, and they salvaged the last game against the Yankees tonight. It was looking really bad, honestly. I shut it off. I thought they were going to get swept. Turned it back on in the 9th. See, they had a 1-run lead. So Jays just holding on by the skin of their teeth. Honestly, they're due to go on a run. I just feel like they're on a run because they are a top team. We'll see what their rotation, whether it can withhold the loss of Ryu or not for the Toronto. Number 7, we're at the Minnesota Twins. 2-1 against Seattle, 1-2 against Arizona. 500 a week, a little more what I expected Minnesota to be like this week for a more regular basis, but they still kind of hold the edge on all these teams below them. Beat Toronto, beat Tampa, beat Boston, beat all these other American League teams, but there's quite a big gap once we start to get into the top 5. To me, there's a pretty big gap between maybe, like, if we're looking here, probably 16 to 7 are pretty interchangeable. Even number 6, I'm going to throw number 6 up there, St. Louis. 3-1 against Pittsburgh, 1-2 against Boston. They do have the division lead, and they've handled Pittsburgh. And I just think on paper, with Mikolas having a monster year and having that great outing this past week, Wainwright always going deep into games. The rotation, the top end of the rotation has turned out to be all right. I know it's been a big concern of mine. But really, from 16 to 6, a lot of these teams are 1 10-game win streak away from going from here up to here. Like, it's tight. I think it's not until we get into top 5 that we're starting to talk about teams that are really starting to walk away with it a little bit. Top 5 has been pretty consistent, at least probably 6-7 weeks now. But we see a lot of interchanging parts. Bottom pretty consistent, top end pretty consistent, and it's starting to be a little more solidified in the middle. But that's just how she goes, right? Number 5, San Diego Padres. 4-0 against the Cubs. So they start the week just huge, and it kind of went into supporting what I had said about them last week. But then they end the weekend getting swept by the Rockies. So it's like, I don't know what side of the Pirates we're going to see. I do think they're definitely a top 5 team, though. We'll see what next week brings, and that brings number 4. We got the LA Dodgers. 2-0 against the Angels, and then they lose to the Guardians over the weekend. Dodgers continue to hold on top of this division just by the skin of their teeth with the Padres, but I think at the end of the day, we know both these teams are going to make the playoffs. It's going to be whether who wins the division and gets that first round bye and who doesn't. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. Otherwise, I think that they're both going to be in there. Number 3, it's been a long time coming probably. Houston 2-1 against Texas, 1-1 against the White Sox, but they're playing right now like I already talked about. But the space between them and the Angels is just growing and growing and growing. It's pretty obvious now that they're, barring unusual circumstances, they should walk their way to the division. And at that rate, possibly a first round bye, right? I think it's the 2 teams get the bye, right? So between them and we know who's up top, but I think it's pretty secure at this point. And those are going to be the 2 teams that we see getting byes, right? Number 2, same spot as last week. We got Mets, 2-1 against Milwaukee, 2-1 against Miami, and they plan to get another game tomorrow. But yeah, a lot of talk this week because number 1 continues to be the New York Yankees, who are just obliterating. 3-0 against Tampa, 2-1 against Toronto, so against their 2 top 10 teams at the time. Yankees just crushing. This is probably one of the best teams we've seen in a long time record-wise, being in the 750s win percentage. Insane. And honestly, they could keep it going because they're sweeping the Rays. They're beating up on Toronto. Boston, they've had their number for the most part. And honestly, I don't see how Boston on a given day is going to beat the Yankees. Yankees are a top team. There's a good reason why they're first. A lot of talk this week about what it's going to look like to have a Subway Series between the Mets and Yankees. And how can I blame people? They're 1-2. They've been 1-2 on my power rankings, I think, for 3 or 4 weeks now. Mets have been 1 at one point. Yankees have probably been 1 for 5 weeks in a row now. But yeah, there you guys have it. It's the MLB Power Rankings as of 2022 Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everyone and all the fathers out there. Let me know what you guys think. Where do you guys see something a little bit different? And yeah, what are your picks for the World Series at this point? I guess if you have to listen to my power rankings, this is my pick. What else can I say? Thanks for watching. Peace out.